we have come to another very short section of Scripture to look at that we will not spend too much time in. We will take a look at it. We will read and see what it has to say. We will try to make quick application, and then we will prepare for another time. We are looking at Mark, the 10th chapter, and we are continuing in verse 32. Now they were on the road going to Jerusalem, and Jesus was going before them, and they were amazed. And as they followed, they were afraid. Then he took the 12 aside again and began to tell them the things that would happen to him. Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be betrayed to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and scourge him, and spit on him and kill him, and the third day he will rise again. So as we begin looking at verse 32, we see the phrase, on the road going up to Jerusalem. And the reason the term going up to exists is because Jerusalem was at an elevation where the city itself could not be approached from any direction without some type of ascent to arrive. So anytime that people talked about going to Jerusalem, they would speak of going up to Jerusalem. And as we look a little bit further in the verse, we see that Jesus went before them. And I think the emphasis that we can give to those we are studying with is the idea that Jesus at this time has a clear focus and determination. He is on his way to Jerusalem. He is on his way to fulfill the work God has planned for him. And so this is kind of where we're at right now, where Jesus is headed to what will ultimately be the final hours of his life. And we also see that those who followed were amazed. And this idea of amazement is astonished or even frightened. They can see this resolute mindset of Jesus to go to Jerusalem. They see him walking ahead of them, despite the fact that they know the Jewish leaders hate him. They know the history that he has had with the Jewish leaders, and so they're amazed at the desire and the fortitude that Christ is showing to get to Jerusalem. And they are afraid, and this is from where we get our English word phobia or fear. And they're afraid what may happen to themselves as well as to Jesus when they arrive in Jerusalem. If they are with him, and if the Jewish leaders choose to, if they are going to harm Jesus in any way, they could potentially harm those who would follow him as well. We also want to make a quick note here that we're talking about those who followed him, and at this particular moment we are not specifically talking about just his 12 disciples. We are talking about the crowd that has actually stayed with and chosen to follow him. And then we see the phrase, and I just kind of implied it already. It says, as they followed. So they were afraid, but it's clear that they still continued to follow. They didn't allow their fears to control their actions. Again, here's a great time to discuss the concept of how we can allow for fear to prevent us from doing those things that we need to do. And so it's something that we can talk about and let people know that while we may not always know the answer, we can't allow fear to prevent us from doing what we need to do. And then we have the phrase, then he took the 12 aside. So that's how we know that he is speaking first off of the entire crowd. Now he is going to once again separate out his 12 apostles from the crowd. And he's going to once again begin to explain to them specifically what is about to happen to him. So now he's pulled the 12 aside, he's taken them somewhere, and he's going to once again reiterate things that he has already spoken of. And he makes the statement, behold, we are going to Jerusalem. And many feel this idea of saying behold is that Jesus is trying to get the attention of the 12. He's trying to say something that causes them to understand that, hey, you need to listen. What I'm about to say is very important. And it is, because he's once again going to go into great detail about what is to take place. And very simply, the remainder of verses 3 and 34 tell us exactly what Christ said to those 12. Very easy for us to understand, and it is exactly what now we can understand would take place in the life of Christ. And the first thing is that he would be betrayed to the chief priests and scribes. Those chief priests and scribes would condemn him to death and then turn him over to the Gentiles, and he will be mocked, scourged, spat upon, killed, and rise again the third day. And so here we have a brief list of the very things that Jesus Christ is going to go through. We see how terrible these things are going to be, and we see that he knows what's going to happen to him. And the final point that we can make is that he's still going willingly. Despite the fact that he knows what's ahead of him, what he can look forward to as he's on the road to Jerusalem and as time is to come, he decides to do all of this and to accept all of this willingly. And that should be a great point of emphasis to anybody that we would study with. The sacrificial nature and the idea that there was nothing that was going to prevent him from doing what he did to please his Father, but also for the very individuals that we're trying to teach as well. So we will stop our recording at this particular time, and I encourage you to pick up your study beginning at verse 35. That is where we will try to begin in our next session. And kind of as you go through and study this particular session, keep track of what's just taken place, because we've had the statement of Jesus, and now we're going to see something said by the apostles after he's expressed these things. And I'll leave you with that thought. Thank you.